In this video, I want to discuss the term nationalism. Why is it such an important idea in history, and why is it so important specifically to the era of the French Revolution? You've probably noticed that the root of the word nationalism is nation. So we should start with the question, what is a nation? A nation is a group of people who share a common identity. They may speak the same language. They may be from a common ethnic group. They may enjoy the same music, they may have the same religion, they may enjoy the same pastimes, the same sports. The important part is that they believe they have these things in common, even if they have never met everyone in their nation. It's the way a group of people construct an identity for themselves. This identity can be built around things people associate themselves with, like the old saying, "That's as American as apple pie." It can also be built around things that are seen as different than a group of people, like a Frenchman who thinks that having a king and a monarchy is not a very French thing. But remember, you don't have to know or be sure that every person in the nation is the same in order to have a sense of nationalism. For example, though I've traveled around the United States, I've never been to Chicago, Illinois. However, I know they speak the same language as me, eat some of the same foods as I do. Their students go to schools just like the ones in Florida, and they vote to elect their governments just as I do. Even though I will never meet every single Chicagoan, I imagine that they are similar, and so we are part of the same nation. They probably imagine the exact same thing about people in Florida, California, Ohio. Communication allows us to test this in lieu of me traveling the country to meet every single person. Through, say, the internet, I can see that indeed Americans share a common culture, even though we all have our individual differences. Now, the nation-state, slightly different word there, is formed when a group of people who share a common culture band together and create a political government. This is how most of the countries we are familiar with today were created in the last several centuries. The nation of Great Britain was created as the English, Welsh, and Scots united under a common political system. India is another good example. It is a country of many ethnicities and cultures. However, India was created as these separate nations united based on their commonalities in a common political system. The nation of France is another example of a nation-state, and thanks to the French, nationalism has been one of the dominant forces in the world since the French Revolution. The French are very proud of their ideas of their Enlightenment philosophers, men like Voltaire and Rousseau. They developed a common sense of pride in their Frenchness, the tricolor flag embodying it. This was based on their common language, their geography, their culture, and most importantly, the way they reinvented their government based on the ideas of the French Revolution: equality, liberty, and brotherhood. However, when the French began to export these ideas to other countries, they awakened rival senses of nationalism. The British, for example, saw the French and their ideas as natural enemies, and they constructed their own sense of Britishness, that is, what it meant to be British and, more importantly, not French. And that's why when you think of Britain, we tend to think of the Queen, tea, things that are very specifically not French. The same things happened in the various German kingdoms. Quite simply, modern nationalism was born as much of Europe decided that they did not have things in common with the French, but rather with their own people and their own homelands. In the years after the French Revolution, nationalism continued to be a powerful force. The nations of Europe waged wars over their differences, whether those differences were political, cultural, or even religious. They built empires meant to spread power and prestige, as well as their own culture, to the far corners of the world. The nations of Italy and Germany were both unified by nationalism in the late 1800s, as Italians and Germans used their commonalities to construct their own nation-states and retain their differences from the people around them. Each nation-state tried to outdo the other and assert its own power. By the early 1900s, senses of nationalism had become so strong that they clashed and led to the extremely destructive First World War. Each nation was so confident in the superiority of its own military that they failed to plan for the destructive capacity of modern technology. Today, however, as the world becomes more and more connected through modern technology, as cultures, languages, and people mix, nationalism could very well be slowly eroded. Only time and more history will tell.